This forecast is brought to you by me. For information on readings I offer, check out my website at manic.mercurian.net, or you can reach out to me directly at manic.mercurian@gmail.com, and as usual, all of that information is in the description box below. Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, January 16th through Sunday, January 22nd, 2023. This week we have kind of a few things going on. I think you'll be happy to know that Mercury is turning direct this week. So it is stationing direct to 8 degrees Capricorn. We also have the Sun moving into Aquarius this week. Immediately after the Sun enters Aquarius, we'll have a new moon at 1 degree Aquarius, and we have Uranus turning direct at 14 degrees Taurus. So all of this and more is basically saying that we're very much moving forward this week. We may have been a little bit stagnant in the weeks leading up to now, stagnant, and our focus may have been more on shifting perspective and kind of contemplating things. I've talked a lot about how, winter tends to be about contemplation and sort of planning anyway, especially in Capricorn, which has to do with the physical side of manifesting what will sort of play out over the next year. So we've been sort of more contemplative with these retrograde energies, but now that definitely comes to an end and we are moving forward. But before we actually, move full speed ahead, we have to deal with these somewhat stationary energies. And this leads me to something that I didn't totally mention in the forecast last week. I'd like to be very transparent with you guys and say that I'm not perfect. It's not that I said anything wrong necessarily last week, but I did want to expand on a couple of things. Mostly just with these stationary planets, not only Mercury and Uranus, but especially Mars as well. Mars just stationed direct last week, so it's been pretty much stationary as well. It's still at 8 degrees Gemini where it's stationed direct. So whenever you have a planet station retrograde, or in this case station direct, the planet has to slow down first. It basically comes to a standstill, and whenever planets are slower, they are more intense. So you can imagine where I'm going with this. Having Mars stationary over the past week or so, Mars is already an intense energy, so having that station direct, it does intensify an already intense energy. So I think tempers have kind of flared up a little bit, especially for people that have strong Mars or placements around 8 degrees Gemini. There may have been frustration or irritability, things of that nature. And then when we add that with, now we have Mercury turning direct as well, Mercury stationing direct. Now, not only the, ambition and the warlike energy is intensified, but also the mental energy, the intellect, the communication is intense as well as we go through this transitional process of Mercury turning direct now. One more thing to make this all even more interesting is that, something I didn't notice before is that Mars has just stationed direct at 8 degrees Gemini. Mercury is now stationing direct this week at 8 degrees Capricorn. So very interesting. They both are stationing direct at 8 degrees of their respective signs. The angle that is made between 8 degrees Capricorn and 8 degrees Gemini is a quincunx. You really don't hear me talk about quincunxes a whole lot on this channel, just because this is a minor aspect, so it's not as dominating, it's not as tangible as the major aspects, which I do talk about frequently on this channel. But I did want to talk about that angle because it very much applies to last week as well as this week. Whenever you have a quincunx, you're basically involving two energies that are so different, there's really no blending them together. There's no compromising between the two. So in this case, Mercury in Capricorn and Mars in Gemini, these signs have, about as little in common as you can possibly have with two signs. Gemini is late spring in the northern hemisphere. Capricorn is early winter. Gemini is mutable air. Capricorn is cardinal earth. One is yin, one is yang. There's just nothing. There's nothing to connect over. There's nothing to compromise. There's no reconciling this difference. So especially considering that both of these energies are intensified and going through a change, and both in a way that's very different than the other. I think this may be a little bit awkward this week, as well as last week too. Intense, awkward, but powerful in the sense that we're making that transition to move forward. And once we do get through this week here, then we will enjoy all the planets being direct. So, again, although this process may be a little bit difficult or intense or serious, it's at least, it's moving us to a place where we're very much going to go full speed ahead in the very near future. Okay, and then plus going back one more time to Sun moving into Aquarius, New Moon in Aquarius. I always say, the Sun moving into a new sign is, of course, the beginning of that sign. But also the new moon in a sign, that is the beginning of that sign as well. So having both, so close together means that we're really, in a way, we're almost forgetting all about Capricorn. We had this huge kind of stellium in Capricorn for the last several weeks. But very rapidly, the focus transitions this week from, all about Capricorn to all about Aquarius. So, these two signs do have a lot in common. They both are winter signs in the Northern Hemisphere. They both are ruled by Saturn. So, in other words, we're still in a time of focusing on our obligations, our commitments, our long-term plans, things of that nature. These are kind of heavier energies. They're very dry. The difference, though, is that moving from an earth sign to an air sign, things become lighter. So there's more room to be spontaneous. That's where Aquarius has this more radical side to its nature. I do want to say happy birthday to all Aquariuses as well as we get into this Aquarius season. Okay, so that's enough babbling. Let's get into the day-by-day forecast here. Okay, so we start out Monday, January 16th with the moon in Scorpio. So the moon is about to sextile the sun, so that's really nice. We're stepping into this more kind of harmonious energy. Sun and Capricorn, moon in Scorpio, both of these have a lot in common. They're very ambitious energies. They're a little bit serious. They want to make sure that they're very practical in a very strategic sort of way. Also, these energies are very private, so that's kind of the energy that we start the week on. So definitely good for being very productive, I think. But there's also a different side to this. Moon and Scorpio will cross over the south node today, so that's bringing in some kind of darker vibes, especially, since this is in Scorpio. Darker, mysterious vibes. We may be focused on, insecurities, secrets, mysteries, things of that nature. And we also have the moon stepping into a trine late in the day with Neptune, so that adds even more mysteriousness and emotion and spirituality. So I think it's interesting that in the middle, or well, at the end rather, of Capricorn season, which is very practical and physical in nature, we get this little burst of watery energies. So in other words, all this is to say, on Monday, although it's a very productive and ambitious focus as we begin the week here, there's also this really mysterious, kind of gloomy, emotional side to things as well. A part of us that wants to figure something out, some kind of mystery or complexity. Okay, and then going forward to Tuesday, January 17th, this is when we get that exact trine between the moon and the sun, right at the end of sextile. Sextile between the moon and the sun. Sun will be at 27 degrees Capricorn, and moon will be at 27 degrees Scorpio, just before noon Eastern Standard Time. So that's really beautiful. Whenever you have the moon, in a harmonious aspect with the sun, we all feel this. This is an easygoing energy. It's still in the signs of Capricorn and Scorpio, so it's still very ambitious, private, strategic, things of that nature, but it's harmonious, it's stable, so we can enjoy that. A little bit after noon Eastern Standard Time, the moon does leave Scorpio and enter Sagittarius, so things can lighten up a little bit. We have that more fiery, more cheerful energy of Sagittarius, but you have to remember that this part of the lunar cycle means that the moon is winding down. It's it's at the beginning of the end of its lunar cycle. So if you do see the moon in the sky at this point, it will be barely a sliver. It's closing things out, it's ending, And Sagittarius does have a side to it where it is very much capable and willing to explore non-physical things, if that makes sense. So Moon entering this part of the cycle, we get this little bit of harmonious energies and vibes right before things become a little bit less energetic in nature as we approach that new moon. Okay, and then for Wednesday, January 18th, Mercury turns direct at 8 degrees Capricorn. So again, Mercury's really not moving at all this whole week. So it's very much a transitional phase, intensified information, intensified communication. Everything that Mercury rules is intensified as we make this transition, ending Mercury retrograde. I do want to mention too that even once Mercury does station direct, we're still dealing with the themes that we were dealing with during the whole Mercury retrograde process, because Mercury still has to go back over the whole area, in Capricorn, for example, that it just went over. So in other words, we're still dealing with the same themes, the same information, but rather than being in the process of going backward like we were with Mercury retrograde, now we're going forward. So we're still dealing with those things, but we're tying up loose ends. We're dealing with things, we're solving things, and moving forward now. Going forward now that Mercury is direct. Moon continues through Sagittarius, and it will make an opposition to Mars. So that's channeling that fiery energy, especially since the Moon is in a fire sign, making an opposition to Mars, which is freshly direct at 8 degrees Gemini. That could just bring in some kind of irritability, fiery energy, basically Mars energy. So that dominance, that aggression, that ambition, the competitive energy. This is happening specifically with Gemini, and Moon is in Sagittarius. So these signs have to do with learning. So we may be a little bit irritable or competitive when it comes to learning or expressing ourselves or information, things of that nature. What is typically a very light-hearted area of the chart is a little bit more intense, since we have these types of energies there, Mars and the Moon opposing Mars. And then one major aspect for Wednesday is that we do have the Sun crossing over Pluto. So, Sun and Pluto both at 28 degrees Capricorn. This is intense again. I feel like I keep saying that word. There's a lot of intensity going on in this week in general. But yeah, Sun crossing over Pluto. Pluto is definitely a darker energy. It is destructive, I think. Typically it does correlate to destruction of whatever is not good or valuable, whatever is not just, but it's still destruction. That can still be difficult. It tends to bring up energies in us that have to do with insecurities, fears, paranoia. It basically brings up your weaknesses so that you can confront them and become stronger, ideally. So with Sun crossing over Pluto, this is really just applying to Wednesday, but we all experience that. We all experience this in our own way. Look to where 28 degrees Capricorn falls in your chart, because you may be dealing with some kind of transformation there. Something dark may be brought to your attention in that area of your chart for you to reconcile. So, for example, if this is at the top of your chart, this is going to be in your career or in your public life. Something dark is going on there that you need to look at. Or maybe this is in your third house. It has to do with friends or siblings, things of that nature. Just look to where this falls in your chart. Okay, and then going forward to Thursday, January 19th, Moon leaves Sagittarius and enters Capricorn. So now we're very much approaching that new moon. Moon is kind of chasing after the Sun. The Sun is at the last degree of Capricorn, though. So, we're almost to that Aquarius new moon, but it's just interesting right now. Right now, Sun and Moon are in Capricorn, as well as Mercury, but very soon the focus will dramatically shift, and both the luminaries will be in Aquarius. But as for now, on Thursday, it's sort of, it's a dark moon phase. We're on the cusp of that new moon, so it's very much an ending phase. These periods are excellent for spiritual endeavors, for shifting our attention to the non-physical, or also just resting in general. Like sleeping is a more mundane example of that. So yeah, this is just it's the least energetic part of the lunar cycle for sure. This is a great time for sort of resting, slowing down, and processing, maybe thinking about what our intentions are, our plans, our goals, things of that nature. Especially with these planets freshly direct as well. This is sort of it's interesting. It's almost like everything on January 19th, or really the whole middle of the week, it's almost like everything is kind of at a standstill. Rather than going back and contemplating, and thinking like we do with these retrograde energies. Now we're in the process of moving forward, but before we do that, we have to kind of just be at a standstill, just like the planets are. We're sort of, I don't know, we're halfway in, halfway out. We have to be at a standstill before we begin gradually gaining momentum going forward, if that makes sense. So that's what we're kind of on the edge of, on the cusp of. Friday, January 20th, Sun enters Aquarius, and Moon continues through Capricorn, though. So although the Sun has, sort of begun things in a new sign, we're not quite at that new moon phase yet. That will happen on Saturday. So it's sort of like a 1-2 punch type of thing, if that makes sense. But Sun entering Aquarius does start the Aquarius sign, so happy birthday, Aquariuses. Like I talked about in the intro, Aquarius continues many of the themes that Capricorn deals with, but in a little bit of a lighter, more experimental type of way. We're still very mindful of our obligations, whether those be with tradition, community, or just personal obligations to our friends and family, or to ourselves, goals that we have in mind. All of that is very much in our minds. I think the way we experience this, in modern Western society is through New Year's. We're all, focused on resolutions and goals for the year, things of that nature. So, it's very goal-oriented energy. So that continues with Aquarius, but now we can be a little bit lighter, a little bit freer, to maybe be a little bit rebellious, or, although we're very mindful of those obligations, we can also stray from them. That's where there's this double-sided nature of Aquarius, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the beginning, but this is still a sort of slow, it's a sleepy beginning with these planets freshly direct, and with the moon, on the cusp of a new moon like this. We still have this kind of sleepy energy. So although we all are goal-oriented, it's more like these things are kind of in our minds right now. It's not so much about, going out and being a go-getter and accomplishing all your goals. I'm sure there's some of us that are at that, phase right now, depending on the way these things fall in your chart. But for most of us, we're kind of sleepy. We're a little bit hesitant. I think we've gained a lot of perspective over the last several weeks, but we're almost ready to apply that and start moving forward. We're just not quite there yet. It's a little bit dreamy still, if that makes sense. Okay, and then going forward to Saturday, January 21st, now we get that new moon in Aquarius. Moon enters Aquarius. Sun is only at 1 degree Aquarius, so new moon at 1 degree Aquarius. So this very much begins the Aquarius energy as well. And I think this may be kind of a dramatic change. It's dramatic having so much energy focused on Capricorn, and then within the span of 1 to 2 days, now everything's about Aquarius. We just had 4 planets in Capricorn. Now we have 4 planets in Aquarius and only 2 planets in Capricorn. So yeah, the focus is very much on being a little bit more impulsive, a little bit more spontaneous, free thinking, radical, independent, rather than, in Capricorn for the last several weeks, the focus was more on being very practical, down to earth. I think the main difference that I can describe between Capricorn and Aquarius is the heaviness. Things become so much lighter in Aquarius. So there's almost more room to exercise your free will, if that makes sense. There's still this kind of seriousness to it, though, or this dryness, especially because we have Saturn, which rules Aquarius. Saturn is in Aquarius as well. So we still have to have the Sun and Moon cross over Saturn, which will be a little bit, heavy or kind of dry as well, and still very much reminding us of our obligations, making sure that we're being mature and wise, and making sure that we're being good boys and good girls, basically. having to be mature, responsible, having to make sure our resources are allocated effectively. All of that, is still kind of heavy on our minds, I think, at this time. Okay, and then going to Sunday, January 22nd, Uranus turns direct at 14 degrees Taurus. So this too, we have one other planet turning direct, stationing direct. This is a little bit different though. It is an outer planet, so this means that rather than us personally, shifting, moving forward, being more active, this is applying to us all collectively. It's applying to us as a society. So this is where you could see more action with world events, with even national or international news and events, with the economy, with politics and the government, everything in those areas, especially with the economy, since this is in Taurus, which has to do with money and resources. But in all of these more kind of global areas, that's where you may see much more activity moving forward with not only Uranus direct, but we have all the planets direct, whether those be inner planets having to do more with the personal level, or all the outer planets having to do with society and politics and all that. All of it's direct now, so we're really going to see a lot more activity. And I do want to mention too, it's not necessarily that there's not that activity with planets retrograde. It's just that when planets are retrograde, the activity is either non-physical in nature, it's mental, it's emotional, or it's behind the scenes somewhere. So for example, when outer planets are retrograde, there typically are a lot of changes happening to our world. It's just that we're not privy to a lot of that information, if that makes sense. So with Uranus turning direct, we may get a lot more information. We may become much more aware of changes that are happening societally, especially economically. I do think it's very interesting, right as Uranus technically stations direct on Sunday, the moon will be halfway through Aquarius, so the moon squares Uranus, so it brings our attention there even more. So this just increases the chance that there may be some kind of event or shift on Sunday. Again, this could have to do with economics, but it could also have to do with technology, since the moon is in Aquarius, and so much energy and so many planets are in Aquarius. So Aquarius does have a lot to do with technology, social media, things of that nature. So there could be this interplay between technology, media, etc., and the economy, some kind of shift there. Other than that, we do have Venus crossing over Saturn today as well. So this too, I feel like, has financial implications, economic implications. Venus represents not only just love and beauty, but also, our enjoyment, our abundance, our money, basically, among other things. And with that crossing over Saturn, that could represent us having to be more mature or disciplined with our money, with our resources, with our pleasure, having to find pleasure in sustainable ways. With Saturn, we have to be mature, we have to be grown-ups, we have to think for the future. We have to think about more than just ourselves. All the stuff that is very good to do, but it is difficult. It's not always fun. It's not always enjoyable in the moment. So that's, this aspect is showing that that's what the focus of our love, pleasure, desire is. Being serious, being realistic, especially being mindful of social obligations or traditions, things of that nature. Still, this is Aquarius, so we still have the option to rebel or exert our autonomy as well. But even that, even in doing something more rebellious like that, we still need to be aware of the long-term kind of implications of what we're doing. So it's a little bit serious, it's a little bit dry. So yeah, again, having that, on a collective level, that can indicate a halt, a delay, a challenge economically, and then combining that with Moon trining Uranus, which is turning direct. I would just kind of keep a lookout on things. There could be some kind of event, some kind of economic shift today. Okay, but that's what I have for you for this week. So it's a very interesting week, at least on paper. Astrologically, it's interesting because this is a transitional point. I think what's going to feel a lot more interesting to you as you navigate these energies are the weeks following this week. Because, like I said, this week, yes, technically all these planets are turning direct, and by the end of the week, all the planets are direct. So that is exciting on paper, but you have to remember they're still stationary. They're still sleepy. They don't have that momentum yet. We haven't built up that momentum. So going forward over the next few weeks, moon will gain light, and once we get that quarter moon next week, that will really kind of zap us with some energy, get us going, with that first quarter moon in Taurus. And then plus, all the planets are direct, and they'll be fully kind of direct moving forward as we get into the following weeks here. So very, very exciting things to come. This is the beginning of something exciting, but I don't know if that will be obvious as we experience it this week, if that makes sense. Stay tuned. Next week we have Venus moving into Pisces, so that's always nice because Venus, the the love goddess, which bestows upon us love, pleasure, desire. She is exalted in Pisces, so she's kind of at her peak power there. So that's definitely great to have. We love having those easy, exalted energies. And besides that, we just have that first quarter moon that I mentioned next week, which I think that'll be really great for really, again, kind of zapping us, like kind of bringing us back to life, shoving us into this, more future-oriented energy, more action-oriented energy. I think we could definitely use that around this time of year. So I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you for listening. And, like I said, I'm always available if you want a reading, or if you just want to talk to me for whatever reason, hit me up, manic.mercurian@gmail.com. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week.